Hey guys, today's episode with Ricky Pierce is coming up in just a second. 16 years in the NBA. Is Stephen Curry the greatest shooter in NBA history? Well, Ricky Pierce was a pretty great shooter himself, and he offers up his opinion on that. He talks about his journey with Jesus, what it was like to be an NBA player and follow Christ during the mid-1980s and into the 90s. Lots of fun stories and commentary here from Ricky Pierce, and it's coming up right now on Sports Spectrum.
Welcome to the Sports Spectrum podcast, where faith and sports collide. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the show. I am Jason. This is the Sports Spectrum podcast, our website, sportspectrum.com. Make sure you go check that out each and every day for commentary, articles, devotionals, podcasts, all available for free at sportspectrum.com. And make sure you sign up for our 10-day daily devotional. It is free. Written by professional athletes. When you sign up for our Sports Spectrum weekly newsletter, again, all of it's for free at sportspectrum.com. You click on that newsletter icon, and you're good to go to get our 10-day daily devotional written by professional athletes for free right to your email inbox. Sign up at sportspectrum.com. We are presented today by our friends at Compassion International. And you want to check out fillthestadium.com. Right now, you can see the work that Compassion has been doing for the past year or so, working with professional athletes to stand in the gap for nearly 70,000 kids left in desperate need of help because of the pandemic, because of concerts and large events being canceled. This really left a hole for 70,000 children and their families who rely on Compassion International sponsorships from people like you and I. And Compassion could have easily said, you know what, 70,000, we're so sorry, the pandemic hit, and it's just not going to work out. But they didn't do that. They came up with this idea, along with some other professional players and former professional players, to fill the stadium. 70,000 kids, your help, joining professional athletes to stand in the gap and help release these kids and their family from poverty. So check out fillthestadium.com to donate, make a difference, and know that your money is going to help these kids who are just in dire need, in very, very bad situations, poverty like you could not imagine. Fillthestadium.com to donate. This is a stadium that can't remain empty. Fillthestadium.com. Ricky Pierce is our guest today on Sports Spectrum. 16 years in the NBA, from 1982 to 1998. He played in the two best eras of basketball, in my opinion, the 80s and the 90s, and he was ahead of his time. He was two-time Sixth Man of the Year in the NBA in 1986-87, and again in 1989 and 1990. He was one of the most prolific shooters in the league at that time, and he wasn't a guy that was flashy. You know, he wasn't throwing down dunks, and he wasn't making a bunch of no-look passes, although he was certainly capable of that. He was just a guy that came in, did his job, and you couldn't stop him. He come off the dribble, that little one-handed jump shot that he had, man, it was so good and so deadly, and you couldn't stop him. He was really good. Go to YouTube, by the way, and watch some Ricky Pierce highlights, and you'll see how just consistent he was and how dangerous he was on the court as a shooter. He made the All-Star team in 1991, and now since he's retired after the 98 season, and he's kind of in this post-NBA career, he's developed a product as he continues to pass on the abilities that he's had and teach young people about the game of basketball, about how to shoot and be a better shooter. And it's called Accu-Shot 22. And so we talk about Ricky kind of in this new stage of life in his early 60s now, still teaching the game of basketball to young people. But he does it now with a greater purpose, and that's to keep God first and to point people to Christ through the game of basketball. Ricky Pierce joins us today on Sports Spectrum. Take a listen. Hey, Ricky, how are you?
Hey, doing great, and you?
I'm doing well. It's so good to have you here on the show. I've been looking forward to this conversation as like I said, a kid from the 80s and 90s who loved watching the NBA, certainly still a fan of the NBA. I grew up here in the Northeast, so I was a Boston Celtics fan, and still am a Boston Celtics fan. I know you had many battles with my basketball hero, Larry Bird. I'm sure just being on the court with a guy like that There's probably a million stories you could share. So we're just happy to have you here on the show.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Absolutely. So we're in the midst of the 2021 NBA playoffs right now. And this is going to run probably in about a few weeks after we record this. I was thinking about this because your game was so unique as a 6'4", kind of 6'5", small forward, but really more of a shooting guard type of position. How do you think your game would fit into today's NBA?
Well, I would love playing in this era. You can't hand check.
Yep.
Which would be fantastic for me, as a scorer and a penetrator. I mean, I would love to play in this era. Look like those guys having a lot of fun.
There was a lot of hand checks back when you played, wasn't there? You really had to work to get your shot and to get those buckets.
Oh, of course. I was speaking with a guy and he was asking me a question about some of the shooters, like guys like Steph coming off shooting shots. Like I explained to that guy, Steph coming out without being grabbed, held, and pushed. I mean, they shooting clean shots. In my day, you getting hit, held, and, all kind of stuff. Then you have to shoot your shot. I mean, it's a huge difference.
Who were some of the culprits, the ones that held you and kind of poked and prodded quite a bit as you were playing them back in your day?
Well, I remember one guy that I speak on a lot, Dennis Rodman. He's a tall guy, strong as a power forward, of course. I mean, that guy hold you, shove you and body you out. Then you have to try to score after all the holding. So that guy was pretty tough. He was a lot taller than myself. Let's see, 6'8", probably. Guys like Alvin Robinson, Joe Dumars, really outstanding defensive guys.
When I hear of Dennis Rodman, I think of The Last Dance too, but you actually were facing him a couple times a year, 3-4 times a year when he was with Detroit, when he was just getting into the NBA and kind of establishing that reputation as a defensive stopper. I remember him in the finals, and I think it was 88, and they had him guarding Magic Johnson because he was 6'9" and Dennis Rodman was 6'8", and he was guarding power forwards and small forwards when he was facing the Celtics, and then he goes and guards the point guard when he's facing the Lakers, and when he's facing you, he's guarding you. So he was he was unique, wasn't he, as a basketball player?
Well, they was moving him around a lot. And, short periods, he could guard just about anyone, at some stretches in the game, when they need a guy for maybe a minute or two or a play or two. I mean, he had that type of ability.
Ricky Pierce is joining us here on Sports Spectrum. Your career, especially the first half, is tied so much to the Milwaukee Bucks, and they have one of the premier players in Giannis. I'm just curious, when you watch him, when you see him play night in night and night out, what do you see? I mean, you play with some really talented players, some very athletic players. When I think of a guy like Sean Kemp that you played with, but what do you see when you see Giannis on the court? He just looks like such a unicorn, such a dominant force, and such a unique force out there.
Well, the amazing thing about it, a guy that height, right? He playing the point forward. He bringing the ball down, quite a bit. And that causes problems for the opposing team, the big man, because they're not used to picking up their man in the backcourt. Yeah. So, he don't really have that pressure on him. And then, of course, he jump out of the gym. I mean, and that first step is incredible. And his jump shot, he needs some improvement on that three, but his free throws. But for an outstanding player, I would love to have played with that guy. I mean, it would have been so much fun.
Well, and it was really telling when he signed that contract and said, I'm going to commit to Milwaukee. They committed to me. I'm going to commit to them. That was telling because he could have jumped and went somewhere else, but he decided to stay.
And that's what I respect about him. They have embraced him in Milwaukee, and he let the world know that he's not going anywhere. And he had pretty good pieces around him also. Middleton, that guy's a pretty good player. They brought in that guard. I can't think his name right now, but he's playing really strong for them.
Holiday, yeah.
Yeah, Holiday, yeah. They have a pretty solid team. I think he made the right choice to stay there.
Yeah, Middleton reminds me a little bit of Ricky Pierce when I watch him play. The way I feel like if I watched you play today, that would be a lot of your game would be a lot of Chris Middleton's game.
Yeah, I see similarities. I mean, he's a very good player. One guy was telling me the other day, yeah, but he rebounds. He played defense. That was so funny. But you know what I told him? They paying him to do all of that. You know, they just paid me to score.
That's right. And score you did. 2-time Sixth Man of the Year. You averaged 23 points one year. I saw in 89-90 without starting a single game. I think that's still an NBA record. It was back then for sure. So you were counted on to come in, kind of get that instant offense. You know, you had the microwave and Vinnie Johnson with Detroit, but you were very similar in the way that you played your game, right? When you came in, they were looking for offense from you.
Well, I was just embracing the role that they gave me. You know, they told me they wanted me to come in and score. And if the momentum need picking up on offense or maintain, they say, well, hey, keep it up. And, you know, they were throwing the ball my way. And so it was a lot of fun, just embracing my role.
We're so glad to have Ricky Pierce here on Sports Spectrum today. Let's intersect the conversation, as we always do, with faith. Can you kind of share with us the importance of the Lord in your life and your testimony and how God became real to you?
Well, you know, it started when I was young. I always knew about God and Jesus, you know, Jesus dying on the cross for our sins. And so I just took that off into my college, you know, and pros. And like I told one person that was asking me that same question, I would read my Bible, you know, every day, every night, you know, before games, you know, ask God for the strength, wisdom to go out and play a nice game because he blessed me with that talent and ability. So I always open my Bible, you know, before games. And, you know, it's not all about just running up and down the court. You know, you have to give the good Lord, you know, the glory, you know, behind everything that you do. That's important to me and my family.
When you got to the NBA, was it hard to, because I don't know what it was like in the 80s, certainly. I mean, I was just a little kid and my faith wasn't really important to me till I was 27, 28 years old. So even then, my teenage years, when I'm watching, I'm not really caring about anything regarding religion or faith or Jesus or the cross or salvation, anything like that. When you were in the NBA, what was that like? You said you read the Bible before games, but was there chapel? Was there, you know, team chaplains that kind of encouraged you? Was there other teammates? What was it like to, I guess, be a Christian in the NBA when you got there? Was it hard to adjust or was it fairly easy? Well,
most teams have chapels, you know, before games, you know, and players that, you know, was into the word, we would get together. We have our chaplain there. We'll go through verses before the game. And that was a great thing because that just show you have a lot of Christians in the league. And the thing about it, once you hit the court, right, you know you have God with you. You have that faith, but then it turned into a battle. Mm. You know what I'm saying? Then you go from the Christian part of it. Then sometimes, you know, you have to really keep faith because it gets so physical out there. And if you're not careful, you know, I found myself sometime in the midst of the game, give me the strength, God. I mean, if you get elbowed, pushed, and you want to really get tough, you know, to hold some restraints back, and that helps. That works. I mean, I wish a lot of the players today understand, keep your faith. You have to keep your faith because basketball, it comes and it goes. But that faith, you're going to have it. And, you know, I grew into my faith. You know, as I'm maturing as an adult, my faith have gotten stronger. My wife and I, we do our Bible study, our devotions every morning. And she was telling me, I was in Dallas, right, a couple of days, and she told me, did you read your Bible? You know, did you pray last night, right? Then she was telling me this morning before the show, we're a couple of days behind, you've been gone. So I told her, well, after the podcast, we'll catch up on
Oh, that's good. And the podcast happens to be talking about your relationship with Christ. So that's good. How important is that? I mean, your wife encouraging you, doing this as a team? Because I know a lot of people, sometimes they're kind of off on an island by themselves with their faith, and they don't have somebody to do this Christian life with. How important is that to have your wife there to support you and kind of nudge you a little bit, almost like a coach?
Well, we've been married over 35 years.
Congrats. That's great.
We both have grown into our faith together. And she have always, even when I was playing ball, pushed faith, God. And, and sometimes, I would believe, but with the competitiveness on the court, sometimes your mind wander, you thinking more about the game, the basketball. And so I see now how my faith has grown since I've been with her. And it helps having a wife that's really into the word, to keep pushing you and keeping you on the straight path. Sometime a guy, I won't name the guy, he asked me, "Are you still married?" Mm-hmm. I'm like, why wouldn't I be? I'm not going anywhere. As long as she'll have me, I'm going to be here. You know what I'm saying? So, and I encourage guys, keep your faith with your wife and pray. You can stay together. You pray together, you stay together.
It's got to be hard too. I imagine you said 35 years. I'm doing the math here. That's 1987, 86, somewhere in that range when you got married.
Right.
That's when you were first coming into the league. You came in 82. So you're a young player still in 86. You're 87. You're 25, 26, 27 years old. What was that like being married and trying to trying to sustain a long NBA career where the temptations are there? I mean, the stories are out there. I've talked to many athletes myself, not just in the NBA, but in all sports. The temptations are there. The travels, the glory, the people that want to pat you on your back and want to get your attention. How hard was that in those early years of marriage to stay faithful and to trust that, like you said, I'm in this for the long run when all of these temptations, including just playing the game of basketball, is coming at you?
Well, temptations is going to be there, not just sports. I mean, temptations is there coming up through grade school, high school, college. And so your faith, if you keep God first, he'll direct you and guide you. You'll recognize all the temptations that coming at you, if you pray on it. And, he'll lead you right on the path you need to go down. That's the way I see it, and it's God's word, what God talking about, you know what I'm saying? And my wife and I, and that's one of the things that we remind each other, that we have to do the right thing, even when no one is looking, do the right thing.
Is that hard as a player? Like not just for you, but to watch teammates, guys that you play against, you played in the All-Star game. So obviously being around other guys around the league, you don't ever want to name names or call anybody out, but you probably see some things and you're just like, man, this really is a tough life to do that, especially away from God.
Well, I was fortunate to have pretty good teammates. I played with guys that was married, especially the guys in Milwaukee, guys was real professionals pretty much, and they took care of their business. And, they played the game, they went home, and, they kept their family with them. And, I mean, that's what I was seeing. I mean, I didn't go to clubs and hang out. I mean, single guys that go out. I don't think anything wrong with a guy going out. But keep everything in perspective and do it the right way, because as you know, it's temptations and trouble out there. It just depends on what you want to get into.
Do you think it's harder today for the player with social media and all eyeballs on you? I mean, you could play in Milwaukee, right, for especially the first part of your career, and the only way I would see you was on a Sunday afternoon CBS game when you were playing Philly or Boston or Detroit or the playoffs. Now you got highlights and moments happening in an instant on social media, on apps and phones and all that. Do you think today it's much harder than it would have been if you were playing in this era? Not your game, but everything else surrounding it compared to what it was like when you played back in the 80s and 90s?
Well, it hasn't changed. But the principles, you have to have good principles about yourself and integrity about yourself. I mean, the social media, that's just the way the culture is changing with the game and society. And it could be a good thing if you use it the right way, for us promoting yourself, and you promote yourself in a godly Christian way. You understand? So it's really a good thing. I mean, some people choose to do it the right way. Some choose to negative publicity, right? So, and some people you hear, well, the negative publicity is what get the publicity. You understand? So I don't want to do the negative stuff. I mean, I'd rather talk about the things God have done for me and how he changed my life and how he keeping me on the straight and narrow. And like I was telling you earlier, how I'm growing into my Christian life and my belief in doing the right thing,
Well, share that more, where you are today, right? It's a different time and a different season of your life, Ricky, and you have the product called Accu-Shot, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, and God's doing some cool things even in this season of life for you. But where is that relationship and how it's grown and taken shape, compared to where it was when you were 20 or 30 or 40 to where you are now?
Well, when you're younger, you really trying to establish yourself as a player. So, and it's tough. You have a lot of competition. So, you dreamed of being that professional basketball player. You used to watching Julius on television, Jerry West, those guys. And so you want to get there as a player, right? So you put more of your energy and time into training your body for basketball, right? And so now that I'm out of the league, my mind now is more training younger kids. Not only you can be a professional or get you a scholarship to go to college, right? You can also be a good Christian man and a leader and mentor. Starting early. I mean, you can do both. I mean, at that time, I was more thinking of just the basketball. And still had my Bible, but I'm telling kids, put God completely first, okay? And put that basketball second. You can do both. Because God will direct you if you have him in your life. Instead of the other way around, basketball, then God. And that's why I came up, you were talking about that Accu-Shot 22 basketball. Mm-hmm. I have after school program, principles of faith and integrity and discipline. That's what I implement along with the basketball to younger kids. You can do, you understand? So, if I've done wonders for me. Like I told you, my wife and I, 35 years, and we still growing.
That's good. I like hearing that. You mentioned Accu-Shot. Let's talk about that for a second. And then I want to have you share a couple of NBA stories from your years battling in the league. Tell us about that. It's a basketball, but it's also a program, right?
Yeah, well, it's a basketball, manufactured by Spalding. What it does for you is you align your fingertip pads on the basketball. And what it does is give you that backspin rotation at the top of the release of your shot. And it removes your palm off the ball. I have a ball right here that you can see it, right?
Yeah.
See the ovals on here?
Yes.
You don't have that palm on the ball. That's for your right hand and your left hand here. Yeah. So you align that up, and up at the top of your shot, you see that opening right there?
I do.
See? It creates that backspin rotation. And the ball have a great feel to it. And it's a shooter's market right now.
Yeah.
And I think every kid needs this ball if they want to become a consistent shooter.
Let's take a quick break from our conversation here on Sports Spectrum to tell you a little bit more about Fill the Stadium and our friends at Compassion International. Now, you know about Compassion. They are the most trusted child development ministry in the world. All that they do is about children and releasing them from poverty. They do it all in Jesus' name. And now we have this Fill the Stadium initiative that's been going on for more than a year now, and we're making such amazing progress trying to fill 70,000 empty seats with children who are in crisis. 70,000 kids were left without an opportunity for food and shelter and clothing and all the basic necessities that children should have. Normally, they would get sponsored in a regular year, but the pandemic wiped all of that out. And so now you can come alongside myself, our friends at Compassion, our pro athlete friends, and help fill the stadium and release kids from poverty. You can go to the website, fillthestadium.com, to donate right now. Fillthestadium.com, and let's release these kids from poverty. Let's reach our goal of 70,000 filled seats. Go to fillthestadium.com. We're so glad to have Ricky Pierce joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. Ricky, you were a prolific shooter when you played back in the 80s and 90s. A lot of great shooters that you played with and played against as well. And then we have the shooter that we all watch today, Stephen Curry, and led the league in scoring this year. I think he's the greatest shooter of all time. I'd love to hear your take on this. Is he the greatest shooter of all time?
Well, in this era right now, and I'm just like you, I'm a fan of the game, right?
Right.
I love to see the guy shoot the ball. He's shooting it and he's doing it fantastic. I love watching Steph shoot. So is he the best shooter right now? I don't know if he's the best shooter. He led the league in scoring, right? He's a fantastic shooter. I hate to say who the best shooter of all time, because the best shooter of all time, you're talking to him right now. You're talking to the best shooter of all time, right? But you have guys like Reggie Miller that was playing when I was playing, Chris Mullins. Those guys are fantastic shooters too. Ray Allen, I played my last year with Ray. Those guys could shoot the ball. And you got to keep in mind some of the shooters that I mentioned, the Glenn Rice, those guys, they was getting held, pushed, grabbed when they was coming out shooting.
Yeah.
Definitely wouldn't take nothing from Steph. I love him. I could sit here and watch him all day shoot that nice, outstanding jumper. He's fantastic. So I don't know. Jerry West, you go back to those guys there, what are they going to tell you? I spent time with Oscar Robertson in Milwaukee. We spent about an hour or so sitting together watching the Bucks game.
Yeah.
Oscar told me he's the best player that ever lived. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and you gotta believe that if you played, right? You have to.
Yeah. So I didn't really get a chance to see him play a lot. They say he's the best that ever lived. He say he's the best. Of course, Michael Jordan, I played a lot of years against him. And if we going to look at players in that era who was really, really great, he was fantastic. One of the best players I ever seen played against. You see what I'm saying? For his scoring and moving on defense without the ball. Fantastic.
He's the best player you ever saw during your playing days. I have to assume, right, Michael? Yeah,
best shooting guard that would really attack you and just come out, with ability, right? Then, of course, I could go on and on. Magic Johnson, loved playing against Magic, one of the best players ever lived. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Larry Bird, that era. Those guys was fantastic. So how do you say who's the best in the world that ever been? So, there's guys before those guys that I really enjoyed playing. And Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, when I was coming up, he was the best scorer that I ever seen. That hook shot. I saw a game, he made a hook shot from the free throw line. He made a hook shot out of the corner. It was just, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, it's a lot of great ones.
That's fascinating to me to hear your answer too. And I love that because as, and you call yourself a fan today, but as the world that I lived in, and I had the opportunity to work at ESPN for 17 years, and you have people there who are, we're constantly debating these kind of questions at the water cooler. Who's the best player? Who's the best scorer? Who's the best passing big man? Who is the best, to get to the whole, it's who is the best? Who is the best? And it's really hard. I love your answer because I wished you would just give an answer like, yes, clearly he is the best. But the way you described it, because you played, I think it's fair. What if one of those guys, what if a guy like Dale Ellis, who you were traded for, or you were playing in this era, it's very possible you could be looking at somebody like Steph and saying, that guy's the best shooter of all time, because they were so good back then. It was different eras.
Right. Like a guy named Charlie Scott, a buddy of mine, was telling me, hey, man, Charlie Scott, this when I was a young kid, he was asking me about Charlie Scott. I was in the, 7th or 8th grade. I can't remember the grade. But this guy, older guy, knew I played basketball. See, he was in that era, and he asked me about Charlie Scott, and I told him, no, I've never heard of Charlie Scott. Games wasn't really on television. Yeah. But you look at Charlie Scott records, and when he was at the top of his game, he was a pretty amazing scorer, amazing player.
Yeah, I mean, he was on my dad's a Celtics fan. That's where I inherited my love for Boston. And the 70s teams had Charlie Scott. He was on that team with John Havlicek and Dave Cowens in the 70s. So, yeah, but not a lot of people would know about him because they were focused on Havlicek or Cowens, or even, like you say, they weren't on TV as much. So you really only knew about him from box scores in the newspaper. So it was just a different time and a different era. I want to close as we wind down here. I wanted to ask you specifically about a couple games or players and just kind of have you tell me a story or what comes to mind when I mention the games or the players. This will be a lot of fun. Probably more fun for me, but because you get asked these kind of questions all the time. But like I said, you played in our two of my favorite eras of basketball, the 80s and 90s. And I was watching on YouTube, and YouTube's a great place to go when you want to watch old clips of old players. There was a Game 7 in 1987, and it was the Bucks and the Celtics, and it was in Boston. And you guys were taking the champions like right down to the wire. I mean, you had an 8-point lead, I think, with like 3 or 4 minutes to go, and it looked pretty grim for Boston. And then Larry Bird, in essence, saved the Celtics, and they advanced. So I want to ask you about that game and what it was like to play a 7th game, especially in the 80s, in those times with Bird and Parrish and McHale in the Boston Garden. What are your memories from that game?
I don't like Boston.
You don't like Boston?
Because they would beat us, but yeah, they had a fantastic team. They had Parrish and McHale and those guys, and of course Larry, DJ. Yes. I mean, they had, top 50 all-time players on that team. And it was just hard to beat. And they played a good brand, good rhythm of basketball. So you really have to be on top of your game to beat them, right? I mean, you went back a long ways when you were saying the 8-point lead, and, I would have to really go back and look at that. But I can tell you, those guys had a fantastic team. They was well coached. And it's hard to go in there and win in the Garden. It's just hard.
Was it hard to play in a place like that? Is it just, or did when you went into, road arenas, is it not, it's just like, hey, it's basketball? Or is there something about going into a place like the Boston Garden and trying to win a game and play on that court?
Yeah, I mean, it's just basketball, but you have home court advantage, you have fans, and the officials, they have to get out of the Garden. If you make a bad call, fans can be pretty rowdy, right? But, it's just something about home court advantage. I mean, I love to have home court advantage. As a player, you feel you have an edge. You know what I'm saying? If you be the aggressor, you do have an edge.
But there's something about winning a game on the road, too, isn't there? When you go into the other team's home and take what they think belongs to them, there's something special about that, too.
Oh, yeah. You have to go in and you really have to play and you have to bully them. That's just like Boston is pretty hard to bully. I mean, you play a bully game, they bullies themselves, I was looking at that game last night, right? The Clippers. Did you see that game?
Yes.
I mean, they just took it to him. I mean, the Clippers have lost 2 in a row.
Yeah, against Dallas. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but you see their attitude. I mean, Dallas have the right attitude. I mean, they come in, they hit you on the chin, and they just stay at you. You know. I mean, it's hard to win, but it can be done.
And there's something beautiful about doing it on the road for sure. Let me ask you a couple more names. You mentioned, and we talked about him earlier, was Michael Jordan. Do you have a favorite Jordan story? A game that you played against him, maybe some times that you spent with him, just being around him and playing in the era. I mean, you played just about the same time that he did. He came in '84. He played till in '98 and then came back for a couple years later in his career. You came in '82 and you retired in '98. So, Michael Jordan, what comes to mind? Do you have a story you could share?
Well, just competitiveness. You know, I mean, the guy come out every night and he gonna bring it. You know, you just have to go out and do your thing. You know, you don't try to stop him. You do your thing and you try to limit some things. I know when I played against him, I would stay arm length and try to entice him to shoot his jump shot. Because if you play him tight, I think that's what he wants. He wants you to
go right by you.
Yeah, they can draw fouls on you. And if you back off of him, you know, give him that jumper and hope he misses. You know, that's the thing. You know, I told Alvin Robinson one story. Alvin, when he came to Milwaukee, he came in, right? You know, he was a wrestler in high school, I think. And he told me, Alvin, he said, hey, Deuces, let's wrestle. He wanted to wrestle me, right? And I told him, I say, I'm not a wrestler, but it's a guy, he's down 94. That's how we go to Chicago to play the Bulls. I said, they have a guy, he right down 94. That's why we brought you here, to wrestle with him. He'll wrestle with you, you know, and that was so funny. He started laughing. You know, he thought he didn't get it at first. And I told him he's number 23. He loved to wrestle. I told him, I'm not wrestling with you. You might mess around and hurt my shooting hand. But that was pretty funny. He talking about wrestling. I have a wrestler for you.
That's amazing. He's one of the best defensive players that a lot of people, you know, in today's age don't remember Alvin Robertson. He was phenomenal as a defensive player.
And strong as an ox, too.
Yeah.
I remember Jordan put 46 on him, though. And I told Alvin, Alvin, you have to back off of him, man. You own him too tight. You know, Alvin is the guy's an aggressive defender. And so, boy, I tell you, he was on Jordan. I mean, they was like glued to each other. I mean, he was just uptight. And, boy, Jordan was having a field day. I mean, you know, he dropped about 46 on Alvin. And I told him after the game, I said, hey, man, I told you let him shoot the jump shot. If you play him tight, I mean, Alvin knows Jordan game.
Right.
I think they played together on the Olympic team or something like that.
Yes.
So it's not that Alvin don't know his game, but Alvin chooses to be aggressive on defense.
And he got burned.
Yeah.
You mentioned Magic. I want to hear what it was like to play against Magic Johnson. You know, just one of the legends, 6'9" point guard. You're seeing a little bit of that with Luka Doncic in his size and being able to bring the ball up the court. You see it with Simmons and Philly, Ben Simmons. But Magic was just such a unique player and a pioneer, so ahead of his time, so athletic. What was it like to be around Magic? And seemed like a really good guy as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've never heard Magic say a bad thing about a player.
Yeah.
I've never heard him say that. I mean, he loved playing the game. You know, he enjoyed it. He played aggressive. And I've never heard that guy speak bad on anyone as a on their basketball game.
Yeah.
I mean, fantastic player. I mean, amazing. The way he could handle that ball, pass, and he could score if he needed to score. That's how brilliant of a basketball player that guy was.
Yeah, he was such a good player, and I don't know if we'll ever see another Magic. I mean, we see it's a different era, but he was just such a fun guy and such a fun player to be around. All right, my last guy I want to bring up. We mentioned his name earlier, and you were kind of, when you got traded to Seattle in '91, he was just starting to become a superstar, and that's Shawn Kemp. And he was maybe he probably was the most athletic player you'll ever see when you watch him doing things that you never saw on the court with the size that he had. When you came to Seattle and you saw this guy, what was that like to witness Shawn Kemp just kind of growing into his own and become what he became for so many years with Seattle?
Kemp, the type of guy, he really loved playing basketball. He would go play pickup ball at the park somewhere. We could be in the middle of the season. If it's a game going on at the park, Kemp, he'd want to go play. I mean, that's how much he enjoyed and loved playing basketball. I mean, guy just fly out of the gym.
Yeah.
Very competitive. I mean, he was so competitive. I remember a game, I went up to tip in a missed shot, right? I mean, I timed it. I mean, I'm getting ready to tip it in.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, somebody come over to my back, right? And boom, he just dunked the ball through, right? Then we're going back down on the other end. And I'm laughing. He told me, he said, man, it was taking you too long. That's what he told me. It was taking me too long. I fell out laughing. He just go over my back and just dunked the ball in.
You were a veteran at that time. He was probably, 24, 25. He was like, come on, old man. You got to get out of the way here.
That's right. That's right. That's what he was saying right there. It was taking you too long,
He also improved his game quite a bit, though, especially during the time you were there, because early on, Shawn Kemp was a guy who just was dunking. He was in the dunk contest, I remember, and kind of just being around the basket. But he actually improved his game and made himself a more well-rounded basketball player when you were there, right?
You know what we was doing, too? Tim Gergerich, he was there. He was one of the guru coaches. And he came up to me and he told me, he said, well, Ricky, you the old guy. But, I was scoring, right, in Seattle. Yes. I was putting down numbers. And Gergerich know of my training ethics, right, that I would practice on shooting and going left, going right. He told me, hey, man, I want you to do this. To help Gary and Sean, we'll do these shooting drills that he see me doing anyway. So we would come out. He said, if you do it and you pull Gary and Sean out, get those guys, to working on their shots on a consistent basis. So what we did, we started doing the drills and it worked. Sean and Gary, they got into the drill left, right. And, we did it quite often. And so their shot really improved. And they got a better rhythm. Those guys was using just athletic ability. They're young. When you're a young kid, you come out and you just still learning how to play. You just running up and down.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
When you're talking about Gary, too, Gary Payton is who obviously Ricky Pierce is talking about. Ricky, this has been tremendous. Again, Accu-Shot22.com is the website. You got to go check that out. This awesome product that Ricky has to help you and your kids become a better shooter, a more productive shooter in the game of basketball. I wish that was around when I was growing up, trying to learn how to be a better shooter myself in high school. My last question for you, Ricky, and it's a faith question, and it's one we ask all of our guests here on Sports Spectrum. Where you are today, where God has brought you today, what is he teaching you today? What's he showing you today? He teaches us something new every day, right? So for today, as we speak here in late spring of 2021, what has the Lord been showing you and teaching you?
Be a good role model, not only to your family and your kids, but spread the word through the Accu-Shot 22 basketball. Use that as a guide to get young kids, not even just high school, but go all the way down to grade school. You understand?
Yeah.
Use that tool to help direct those guys to have more faith. You know what I'm saying? Not just guys, but girls also. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you got to have that faith, because don't let the devil trick you into thinking it's just basketball. You understand? And being a in social media, being a social media star. You know it's bigger than that. And you know the devil will trick you in making you think that you have to do it the wrong way, get the attention.
Yeah.
Get your morals off, your integrity. You have to have good principles. Being a good leader and giving back, be a Christian leader. You know what I'm saying? Just don't be a leader of basketball. You understand? It's okay to give them a fish if they're hungry. Give them a fish, okay? Sometimes you have to if they're hungry, but teach them how to be fishermen of men. You understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely. He is Ricky Pierce, and using basketball as a way to share his faith in the Lord. Accu-Shot22.com is the website. It's been a pleasure, my friend. Thanks, Ricky, for spending some time with us here on Sports Spectrum, for sharing some stories. Thanks for coming on the show. All the best.
Thank you, sir. My pleasure.
And many thanks to Ricky Pierce, the former NBA player, for joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. I love the stories. I just had to ask him about Michael Jordan and Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, Sean Kemp. I mean, these are guys that I watched as a kid, and to be able to talk to someone about what it was like to play on the court with those guys is pretty neat. And then to ask him about the greatest shooter of all time. And, I was hoping he'd just say, yeah, Steph is the greatest shooter of all time. But he made his point, I think, pretty well, that shooters in different eras could probably be Steph today if they were playing in this era in a different type of style of basketball. And of course, Ricky, very confident at 61 years old, saying, I'm the greatest shooter of all time. Of course, I think I am. And that's great. I love players, because he was a really good NBA player for many years. I love when players think that they are the best. That's confidence. And yes, I'm sure Ricky will look at Steph Curry and say he's doing things that you just never seen on the basketball court. That was a lot of fun, personally. And by the way, I do think Stephen Curry is the greatest shooter of all time. I think Ricky Pierce is right up there as well. And I think guys like Michael Jordan, I think Michael Jordan's the greatest player of all time. There's not even an ounce of doubt on that on my end. And I think LeBron is right up there, along with Bill Russell and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Kobe and, of course, Magic and Michael and Larry Bird. So I have no problem stating my opinion, but I love talking to NBA players and hearing what they think. So that was a lot of fun for me. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Ricky Pierce, again, the website is Accu-Shot22.com. I'll put that in the show notes. You can check that out if you have someone in your family or maybe yourself that wants to get better at the game of basketball and shooting. You can check out Accu-Shot22.com. And thanks to Ricky Pierce for joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. We are the intersection of sports and faith. You can check out our website, sportspectrum.com. There's tons of stories and articles on the website, all for free. This podcast is there, as well as devotionals every single day, Monday through Friday at 6 a.m. to get your day started right with God. You can do those daily devotionals. They only take maybe a couple minutes, and they're right there for free at the website, sportspectrum.com. And while you're at the website, again, I want you to check out our newsletter and sign up for it. You just click the newsletter icon, you put your email in, and you're good to go, and you'll get a 10-day daily devotional written uniquely by professional athletes for free for you to go through on your own, with a team, with a Bible study. Whatever it is, you can get that devotional for free to your email inbox by signing up at sportspectrum.com. Thanks again for tuning in. We love you guys. We hope you have a great rest of your day, and tune in next time for another edition of Sports Spectrum's podcast. See you soon.